Okay, so we've been drying now and we are all, you can see, totally dry. And you can see it dries back quite nicely. You get all those areas. So what I'm going to do is show you a couple of little techniques with this. So over here, to be honest, I have got some very hot water. Okay, so we're just going to put in, to be honest, boiled the kettle for this. We just put a little bit just to stand. Okay, I've got some normal water as well from earlier. So a little bit of cold water here. Okay, now the thing is, because we're playing with clay by its nature, as you might imagine, when it warms up, it gets more malleable, it's easier to move and everything else like that. In the same way, it washes off really easily. So think about it like your plates at home. Okay, so you're doing your washing up, you do it with cold water under the tap, you know it takes quite a bit to get that ketchup off your plate, all right? Hot water streaks it off straight away. Exactly the same way when you're dealing with this type of wash, because the clay will just rinse off very, very easy. So if you're in a situation where you want to leave some pretty hefty dirt behind and grime and all things like that, then the chances are you want to use cold water. Now by using cold water, what's going to happen is it's going to stick more, it's going to chip, it's going to give you more texture and everything else like that. So in the same way as we're down here, you see the wheels are still very, very wet on this, but hopefully the top areas will give us some nice streaking. So this is exactly what we did before. You can just rehydrate and streak down, okay, and you can just take away little bits. Okay, so if we just do a panel like this, you can see we can put down and just make it just as we did before, but this time obviously we would be coming in with the more sort of mud look to it. Instead of it looking very dark, it's now going to give you that sort of more muddy look. All right, so all we do, we're coming in, and if you like, we're just rehydrating to the clay. So these pool areas we've got where it's just built up a bit, we're just going to rub them out. Okay, and then we're just going to go everywhere, just going to bring it down and streak and give it rain marks and all this stuff you hear about that a lot of people talk about. So okay, so we're just using the side of the brush and in the vertical to give us streaking dirt and grime. Now because we're using this muddy colour as well, it should have a lot better use to it. Okay, so that gives you sort of very streaky. So what I'm going to do now, rinse the brush, okay, get most of it off, and then again like we did before, just to refine it a little, make it a little less scratchy looking, things like that. We're just going to come in, okay, just take away those areas and give us a more nice and subtle look. Now a lot of people might say, like, why do this technique and all the rest of it. The thing is, with all these techniques, they are completely safe. And when I say safe, anything goes wrong with this, not a problem. We'll just rinse it away and we'll start again. Okay, so you don't have to worry about huge mistakes and things, and you can play with it. So like you might have seen just then, we had a little bit going on here. We got these little areas at the top, you might see them up here. All right, all we're going to do is hydrate them, so we give them a little bit of a rub, they begin to disappear, and then we just brush around with them and we can blend them all in. All right, so that gives us different layers of weathering. Okay, and that's what it's all about. This, it's the ability to go in to change things easily, simply, and with no risk. So there we go, that's done. So down here you've got effects as, you know, obviously shadowing through washes and things like that. So we've got the dark stuff going on along these rivet heads and everything else like that. All right, so what we'll do is we're just going to try and drop the top camera down just a little bit, which it's not liking today. So let me just drop this top camera down. Okay, so now you can see exactly what we've got going on. All right, so we've taken it from being extremely nice and clean and everything else like that, and given it some hell of a job on the weathering. All right, so that's it. So, you know, depending on how far you wanted to go with this, you could say, yeah, that's fine, I'm really happy with that, no problems at all, time to move on, you know, with the next things. You could seal it down and away you go. All right, now over here on this side, okay, we're going to do something slightly different. So we'll try first with cold water. So down here, this is just our normal cold water into the colour cup. Okay, now think pressure washing your car. Okay, so what we're going to do, we'll just stick it slightly on its edge. We want it to run south, so we're doing the same way, all right? And then we're just going to come along and hit it. Now, immediately as we do this, you can see in one pass, we've cleaned off some of the high side and some of those areas, all right? But because it's cold water, and it's coming through at quite a rate of knots, okay? So this time, because it's starting to go soft now, because it's wet, it will come off a lot easier. So this time, what we're going to do, we are going to come in and be a bit more precise. Down here, as you can see, we're just flicking it up and down. Okay, and we can flick it over the surface to expose stuff and various things just like that. Because don't forget, technically what we're doing is, if we go in here, we can clean it like a pressure washer and take it completely back to how we want it. Okay, now the trouble with this is, because you're using it like this, it is very, very focused and directional and everything else, and that's the trouble with cold water. It's great for doing an overall look, so perhaps down here would be a good example for the underside. Okay, right the way over to wet. Okay, then once it's wet, you can start to scrape off and rinse back to give you different sort of weathered looks and effects. Okay. And as you can see, it's all rinsing it back now to give you different weathered effects and everything else, okay? And this is the thing with cold water. It's not quite as fast as you would be doing it with hot water. So if we just tip that away, dump that. In here, we've got warm water now. Okay, drop a warm water in here. Okay, let's pick up the top. So what we're going to do now is just going to pop around some of these higher areas you can see around here. This is warm water. So you can see it's cutting through a lot quicker. Okay, it'll give you more of a grind out look. Okay, and we're just going to rinse all this off, and we're going to tip it to let the water, by its nature, run south and all those things. And there we go, you get things like that. But if we use hot water, so this is, to be honest, the reason it's in the jug, to keep it a lot hotter, and we just spin this around here, okay, we should see a slightly different effect, okay? If I just lock that off, okay, you can see it's cutting through very, very quickly, okay? So you have to be a little bit more, and to be honest, I got the trigger locked, because if I went in full tilt, it would literally clean it back. So this, okay, and we're just drying now and everything else. And we can go in there and dry it all back exactly how you want it. So it gives you a different area. And then don't forget, the great thing about all of this is, we will just load up again, shall we, so with some of this. So we're going in with the grime, we've got the grime in here, lock the trigger down, and we can re-put this on. And this is the other thing, because it's going over a wet coat, it will filter itself. Okay, and that is one thing which is great for things like this. Okay, so this down here now it's got some on, you can reapply and go in with a second coat, and you'll get this original one showing through a little bit, okay, and then you get the darker one on the top. So it is all different things of going through layers, levels, and everything else like that, okay? And that is the thing with it, you can put in, you can take away, and everything else like that, okay? From my point of view, I'm looking for something we've done like on this side. I quite like this side. It's got this sort of nice warm dirty look and everything else like that, okay? These other ones, not really to my cup of tea, okay? So what I'll probably do with a lot of these is we'll wet the brush, okay, and whilst it's still just a little bit wet and everything else, we're just going to go in and blend like we did in the early days. Just sort of knock this around a bit, blend it around, just take some of this heavy stuff off and push it in to all the nooks and the crannies, because quite frankly it's a little bit too much of what we want. It's supposed to be a modern tank. Okay, so we're just gonna blend these areas now because they're too sharp in contrast. And then what we're going to do, we're going to filter this in a moment, and when I say filter it, we are literally just going to put a rinse of water over it to thin it. Okay, so the thicker stuff that is dried will stay, the bubbles and all the other stuff will literally just run off. Okay, so like this guy on the side now, we can just take a bit of this off. Okay, and we're just going to run this all down in here. Okay, so a bit around these fronts. Okay, because there's nothing worse when it's heavy and overdone. Okay, so we do it literally just like that, and then we are done that. So we've got the warm water, which will work brilliantly. So we're just going to put the warm water into this, lock the trigger down, a little bit more, and then it's just water over the top, and it will thin everything's going on. The bubbles that you see on here will also disappear. Water hitting off the front, good. And what will happen is naturally everything will head south, rinse down. Okay, so I think rinsing your car. So to be honest, we're just coming in now with the water technique around the delicate parts, so around the hatching, okay, and everything else like that. So all of this stuff down here in the back of the hatches, if you watch, we can rinse that off around these guns, the top parts, just knocking it back all the time. Because it's hot water though, it should make it very smooth and easy. Okay, and if you want to, you know, just get in there to thin out certain areas, things like that. But again, it's all that thing of distance. If you're a long way away, then obviously it's going to drain back. Okay. So we're just going to hold this up here so everything runs off in all the right directions. But it is that thing, you can make some great different weathering techniques. Okay, so now we just got air literally in here, so I'm just going to blow all the excess water away. Okay, so we're using this for sort of drying back and everything all at the same time now, because the splash is being caused by the dirty water coming out of everywhere. You can see we've got lots of them. Those tracks and trails from everything will just dirty everything down. Okay, and give us exactly what we're after. Okay. Okay, and then stop. Literally, stop. When you think you've overdone it, stop. And to be honest, I'm getting a little bit too clean there, so that's why I've pulled away from it and everything else like that. Next thing, of course, you can come in now if you wanted to with a hairdryer on a cool setting, dry this back. Just be advised though, if you haven't sealed it, or even if you have sealed it, you may get bubbling. And to be honest, I don't think we've got too. Oh, there we go. We've got a little bit happening. You might see it just down on the front here. So down in here, got this bubbling in the texture of the paint. Again, that's what we're talking about when it gets far too wet and it starts to all come apart and everything else like that. But we've shown you lots of different techniques, but basically doing the same thing. And I know it sounds a little bit odd like that, but in the same heart, my way of doing it, to be honest, is that way. Okay, we do that sort of striping stuff and we pull down that way, we get the nice grittiness and all things like that. So with that one, think old armour, things like that, really, really nice. This is tend to be more modern, so you might want to keep it a little bit cleaner. But obviously this side, we don't have this markings down on here, but we need to put those in. So what we're going to do, we take our brush. This is all still a little bit wet. So we're just going to, coming in, whilst it's still got a little bit of moisture. Okay, and we're just trying to rehydrate things, get things moving, so we can get that nice streakiness back into this and gives it that sort of look of things going down. The only thing is, because the heavy clay was around the nuts and bolts and things like that, the chances are those areas now are going to be cleaner. So you need just a little bit of something. So what I'm going to do is just going to take a little bit of black here, and we're just going to put some black just into these bolts, because we've got these bolts down here, because I want them to cling on again. Okay, so whilst it's just sitting there, literally just like that, and then again, I'm just going to streak it. Okay, because I know it'll cling on around those bolts, and we're just going to do exactly the same thing. This is basically just to get me the same as I've got on the other side, because I don't want it to be different, you know. Okay, so we're just drying back off now. We'll start with these top ones. I'm just going to pull these just around, just to make them, okay, just to sit. As I say, unload your brush between brush pulls, you'll get a very nice effect. But hopefully now you can see we've got nice stuff going on around everything. So I'm just going to take some of this fluid off the bottoms of the wheels. Okay, so when that dries back, hopefully it will give us our same effect as we've got on the others. And there we go. So that's it. I know it sounds like a selling point of doing the wash. Technically I am, I suppose. But what we've covered here, you could go out and buy 10 products to do exactly the same thing. I'm just trying to show you how versatile the wash is and easy. Because at any point, if I'm not happy with any of this now, I would literally either load up the airbrush with warm water and rinse it, or I'll take it over to the kitchen tap with a brush, rinse it all off, let it dry, and I could start again. And there's no risk whatsoever to the paint, the model, the decals, your photo etch, or anything else with it, okay? And that is the beauty with this stuff and the reason why I love it so much, okay? But there we go, that's it. So you've got a couple of things there: streaking, rain marks, obviously your shadowing, whelks, and everything else like that going right the way around it. And then we've got heavy dirt, which is hopefully going to dry onto these and give us exactly what we want when they're fitted to the front. We've got heavy shadowing on here. Again, that needs to be taken back. We'll take it back. You can probably see on these now, just by giving them a wash right over it, giving them nice dark shadows and everything else just down on there. So there we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry completely, then come back and look at it in a good couple of hours, or probably tomorrow, and see exactly what we got. If we're happy with it, then what we can actually do is put it all together, go round, and then we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing right over it, just to make things pop, some details. weather up some of that track system just around there, and then obviously the world's your oyster. You could carry on now. You come in with pigments, you could come in with mud effects, you could come in with any type of effects you want right the way over the top of this. Okay, so we've pushed on a little bit. We've gone around, done a little bit more titivation, things like that. The main thing I did was literally just go around, give it a little bit more black just down on the sides. And I took a little bit more off of the front end, where you can see this. Basically down here we've got more mud at the back. I'm just thinking the way it's going to be throwing this crap up and all around at back here. So we took a little bit more off the front, left the streaking in, but when I did that I took off a little bit of the black and I want to put the black back in. So we've popped the black back in there, but we've left things like down here, this grill area, things like that, particularly muddy around the back, and you can see we've done the same on the other side. All right, but this side's not quite as grimed in because it hasn't got the exhaust and all of that, so I'm thinking that would like add to it. Okay, you might also notice we've been round and we've painted the barrels black because I got that slightly wrong, so we've touched that in. It looks like all the barrels are black, and the smoke and the discharges on the top here, we've actually painted those black as well. Okay, so generally now that's the grime level, just the wash. That's all it was, and it gives all these different effects we were speaking about before, about streaking and all those grimy surfaces just like that. Okay, so now we can move on with the next layer. Now the next layer is basically a very subtle one, but I think it's also quite an important one, and that's dry brushing it. The whole point of dry brushing is that it just makes all the high areas that either white clean look or sunlight reflecting off it. So you're thinking edges, you're thinking bolt tops, and you can add general wear and tear. Now obviously in this particular scale it's a little bit difficult to do wear and tear as such. Okay, basic rule of thumb is avoid using silvers. Okay, the trouble with silver is it's far too bright. Now if you're doing sci-fi and things like that, then yes, go for your life. But on armor, everything is big, it's heavy, it's, you know, very robust. The chances of you getting down to metal are non-existent basically by rubbing it. But what you could do is easily wear through certain areas down to primers and metal that's flat. Okay, so that's not so much a problem. So down here we've got a little bit of a selection. Now, traditionally you can use oils. Now, oils for dry brushing are probably one of the best, okay? The great thing with them is they just keep giving and giving and giving. And when we're saying they will just go on forever, all right? So oils in some ways are far better. You get a lot more control about them, and they're very much more smoother and all the rest of it. Downside to oils, like you might imagine, is the drying time, i.e. they're going to take a couple of days to go off. You get that sticky feel with it, and then you can end up putting little fingerprints and everything around it. So I tend to try and keep things as fast as possible with a build. So for me, I go down the acrylics line. So you've got a couple of options. Obviously, you've got your standard Tamiya's. So down here, we've got some XF19, and we've got some XF85, okay? And I've got some Vallejo colours as well. So down here we've got a medium sort of gunship grey, 097 and 053, which is the dark sea grey. Okay, now the reason for using greys, I use greys as in the worst case scenario for metals and all the rest of it. All right, what happens then is it gives a 3D effect, because I might pop in then with a very dark metal colour to do inside of the grey work. So you can imagine it sort of all folds in. So light greys gives you the shiny reflective look, okay? Blacks will give you a very dark look, and then you go with grey over the top of them to give them that 3D look, and then grey is to go through as in primer looks and all the rest of it. So you're sort of doing a multi-layered appearance with this. All right, so usual thing, you want a nice big brush, or biggest brush. All right, so down here we've got something like a flat-ended brush. You want it to be quite stiff as well. You don't want it to be soft and flecking, because what can happen is you go over a high bit, it flicks then and leaves lines everywhere. All right, now you could use cardboard, but personally I use kitchen towel. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to show you in some different areas different type of effects. So to start with, it might seem quite funny, but we're going to come in with the black. Okay, so we're just going to take a little bit, okay, and we're just going to rub, as you might imagine, most of it off. Okay, so you hardly got any on here. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to pop around certain areas where I think it's going to be quite heavy. So we got this armoured patch around the top here. So what we're going to do, we are literally just going to come in, and we're just giving it some texture right the way over. Now what's going to happen is it's going to cling to the, a little bit more down there, it's going to cling to the wash because of the texture of the wash. Okay. Okay, so a little bit too much. Okay, and this is just a give it that sort of wear and look as if the crew obviously are in here. Alright, so that's the thing with this one. Now these guys down the front, we can do something a little bit similar. This is just to darken it down. Then what we're going to do is come over with a light. Okay, so anywhere perhaps we might get crew action. So we're just very lightly popping round. Okay, just to give some little scuffs and little marks and all those things you can't imagine. Now, as you can think, as this starts to dry down, as it is now, we can then start to pick up the pace just a little bit. This gun deck on the top especially. Okay, so we're just going in. Okay, we know this is an automatic cannon, but you're imagining they're going to be in there a lot for maintenance and arming and all those things. Okay, so we just pop around these a little bit just on the tops. On top of the bigger stowage bins, something around the back here. Stowage bins on the side, and we're just grinding down. And now, as you can see, it's starting to wear off. We can come in here a little bit more. Alright, so that will just darken it down. Alright, and then what we'll do is we're going to come in with the grey. I'm going to go over the top of the black with the grey, and that will knock it then back. Give us a good shake. And give us a dry look. Now, certain things you can go completely over the top with, and dry brushing is definitely one of them. So you want it to be quite subtle. As you can see, we're not going to clean the brush, we're just going to go straight in, over the top. This will give us a dark grey. Okay, get most of this all off. Okay, then what this will do is knock back the black and give us a warm look to everything. So everywhere that we've gone in with the black, we're just going to go over with this. And hopefully it will just wear everything down. And all you're doing with this, like we're going over the checkerboard because it'll make it stand out better. It'll just make everything give a lot nicer look. So anywhere you think it's too dark now, with obviously the black on there, go over this and you'll get a nicer shade. Okay, and then we're just going to come around and we're going to flick over the top of bolts and edges and anywhere that has an area. Okay, and it will just lighten everything off. And as I say, it's all about layering. Okay, so we're just getting in here now to layer on this next area, and as you might notice down here, it sort of fades it. Okay, and as I say, all we're doing is tricking the brain into seeing what it's really not there, and this is basically light reflecting. Okay, so just build it up very slowly, very lightly. Okay, so this, we're just sort of doing these worn areas on the fronts. Okay, and as you say, it will go over the top of the wash because it will cling to it. Okay, and then we're just going to work our way around everywhere. So maybe these grills. Over the smoke discharges, anywhere that's black, go over it because it will give it a shine or a light streak and everything else like that. Okay, and hopefully you can see it's beginning to lighten it up and streak it in and everything. Now this stuff down on the side you want to be a little bit more careful with, okay, because obviously you don't want to change too much, and down here it would be dirty, so we're just doing bolt heads and on the handles and just light streaking up and down, and it'll just give it a little bit of an edge. The chain. Okay, and again, hopefully it'll just stick on the higher areas, on the edges of panels. So we're just going to come both directions now, up and down. Okay, just to lighten it up a little bit. I don't know how well the camera's going to play ball on this, but you can see you're starting to get a reflection on this as well. This is where it's being polished, okay, which is something we're going to knock off in a minute because we're going to give it a dead flat coat. But this side we haven't done, so you can see it's still quite dark. So we're just going to reload the brush. Just rub off on the side to say get it all off, squish it right down. Okay, so starting probably near the front because we want to be quite light, nice and light with this, and then we're just going to let's say we're going the up and down motions because we want it to catch on the armoured plating, but really this is more about the high sides, just getting a little bit of movement into those. Okay, so now we'll just pop around in the wheels, and as I say, you've got a lot of wash going in there, so just be careful how you go in. You want to be lightly over the top, and obviously you can go around and do track. Okay, and obviously we've got track everywhere. Underside I'm not too worried about, this is mainly the top. Okay, so now the front, very lightly, just on these bolt heads on the front down here. But obviously if you wanted to do the track, it would be a dark colour, but you could go over, you know, just to give it some contrast. Okay, all these things with it just like that, but it's one of those nice subtle things, okay, to go round and do. So we're just going to do these guys on the side here. This is vinyl stuff. Again, it's just to give that effect of light, so you don't want too much, and it's just normally the high sides. Okay, so that's those done just like that. Alright, and there we go, that's that one done just like that. So we've got a nice dirty looking with everything still on. You can still see we've got a lot of reflection going on there. So what we're going to do is give this a flat coat. Okay, now you could do this straight away. I'm going to clean the brush out, but we'll move over to the other camera in the spray booth and we're going to give this a dead flat look. Okay, now we're going to give it dead flat basically on the sides, and we're going to give a little bit perhaps up around the top, and we can show you different ways of doing that. Now for that we're going to use this, which is the Vallejo's matte acrylic varnish. Love this stuff, works really well for doing dead flat finishes and all the rest of it, and it's all by distance. Okay, so if you were doing something where you just wanted a normal sort of satin finish, you use a matte varnish and just go in quite close and quite wet, let it dry naturally, you'll be okay. The big thing with this stuff is though, do not go in there with tons of it. If you put too much down, you're going to get that white frosting look and it looks a little bit foggy and all the rest of it. It's all about distance, because distance equals drying time. By the time it gets there, it's quite dry and you get the sandpaper effect, okay? And because it's got lots of distortions and that light can't reflect off of it because it's being bounced around all the surface texture and everything else like that. But we'll get it over in the spray booth, get it together, and we can give it a coat of this, and then we can go around and do the final details.